Welcome to another episode of Uncommon Voices, Uncommon Visions. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Nyberg, and today I have with me my friend, Dr. Nicole Gainyard. You may recognize her from an earlier episode we did together. We're down here in Merida, Mexico.
Viva Mexico.
And we got to talking the other night about doing an episode together that followed up from our last one. Our last one was about being Black mothers with children going through our PhD program. And now as seasoned professionals with our PhDs under our belts, we wanted to continue the conversation with what's next for us and how to explore what's next for you. So I'll start off with, as a person who's kind of in transition from working with school districts in the school district system to trying to launch my own education consulting company, I find that there's a lot of difficulty in navigating that transition, mostly because I don't have an example of how to make that one-to-one transition, and I'm not going on someone else's format. I'm trying to go off of my own. So I feel a lot of uncertainty and just uncomfortableness with trying to find my own voice, trying to find my own marketing, trying to do all these things at one time. But I really feel strongly that to move education forward, sometimes folks like me and maybe like you have to go outside of that traditional system to push and shove it forward. I wanted to give you a moment to jump into conversation, Nicole, and tell us about your experience, where you are in your career.
You know, that's a good point that you make, because we were taught that we have to do things from the inside.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
We need to be able to operate in the system, to do the things that we're supposed to do, to go and get the degrees and to learn how to do everything that goes along with it. But what comes to mind is the master's tools.
Yes, I was thinking the same thing.
Dismantle the master's house.
Right.
And I say that because even I feel like, and maybe you feel this way too, that as much as I've done to try to be within the system, I know that by the time I got to my dissertation stage, I was done. And I really felt like there wasn't a place for me. And so basically for me, when I got my PhD, at that point, I did it because I said, I'm gonna finish. And I wanted to finish what I started. And all of the hard work and everything that I put in, I felt like I had to walk out with something. But in terms of going into academia itself, I just felt like it was not going to be the kind of space that I thought it would be for me. I did not think that it would be welcoming. It just felt very brutal, and I'm not going to really get into all the specifics of that. So the route that I took essentially was private schools. So I got into the independent school world and started working in independent school worlds. And what I found from my experience of working in there is almost similar in ways to what it was like going to graduate school and being at a PWI. Is they want you there.
PWI, primarily white institution.
Yes, predominantly white institution. Is that they want you there, they want to recruit you for the numbers and for window dressing, essentially. But when you try to actually be yourself, it's a problem. And I dealt with that at two independent schools. And so now I'm teaching at a public charter school where it's predominantly Black and Latina. And I'm dealing with a whole new set of challenges within itself. And for me, I hate to say this, but in a lot of ways, I'm just disappointed in, I don't know, I kind of feel like I'm just disappointed in, I wouldn't say myself, but I'm disappointed in the school system, I guess, or the way that I was sold a bill of goods in terms of, oh, this is great, and you could do this, and you can do that. And I'm in the process now of kind of trying to figure out my own exit strategy.
I like how you said using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, because that's a phrase that keeps coming in my head, because I fervently in my 20s thought that was like, yes, you can use the tools. Yes, if you do if you follow the path, if you follow the design the way it's supposed to be, then you get the access. And I think it's particularly for me, since that was very much a generational upon generational message. My grandparents taught my mother taught me, that probably my great grandmother taught her daughter, that it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I think the word you might have been looking for earlier is a little bit disillusioned, because I fervently believe that education is the right tool, but I think the way that it's applied is very, very
It's outdated.
right. Like, I have a mindset coach that I meet with on Monday mornings, Monday afternoons, and we were talking about success. I was struggling to define myself as a successful administrator. And in fact, when it's a husband-wife team, and they have this mindset gym every other Thursday and every other Monday. And I was trying to define myself as successful. And I said, I'm looking at this model of success, which is a white male person who came from the same district I just worked for and is now an independent consultant, and how successful he's become in 2 to 3 years, and how, he was successful as an administrator. And her husband asked me, so, you were successful too, right? And I was like, yeah, but not in the same way. And he's just like, no, that's limiting beliefs. How would you rephrase that? But the fact of the matter is, the fact that I got to the place that I got to in the community that I got there was the success.
That was
the success. And I have to continuously remind me that my success isn't going to be like other people's success, or there aren't real models for my success. And that's okay, but it then means that you're doing a lot of mental and emotional flipping back and forth within yourself to figure out how to redefine, or how do you look at, or what lens are you going to use, or measure are you going to use for this work that you're doing that's outside of that conventional institution. I agree, it needs to change. But it's like a train. You can't just turn a train around. It's got to come to a stop. It's got to rest, and then you've got to figure out like which tracks. And there's a lot of manipulation in that process of turning. But I do believe it can turn, and I do want to continue fighting for it to turn, because we're not anomalies. We're not anomalies, and it's hard, really, really hard not to feel like an anomaly. But we're not.
Well, there's a lot that you said that I'd like to respond to, and I kind of want to backtrack where you were talking about success, or kind of fitting into this system. And I know for me, unlike you, I didn't come from a generation of people who were educated per se. So I literally was doing it on my own, in terms of applying for financial aid, going to college night, going to grad school fairs, filling out applications, doing all of that. And so for me, I guess the shiny whistle was that it represented stability, and it represented respectability. That I was going to be educated, that I had a solid profession, that I would be respected as an educator, and that I would have steady income. And I wouldn't necessarily, people would look at me a certain way because I had this degree, because I taught university, because of all of these things. And so when I decided to go into the independent school world, I can say that the institutions that I taught at were really good, were great. And the curriculum was pretty much, I would say, entry college level sort of work in terms of the kind of curriculum that I was giving them. But I do have to say that I struggled with my own idea of success, because I didn't feel successful. I didn't even feel like I fit in. I never felt like there was exactly a place for me, because I just saw things differently. And so it was challenging for me to, I guess, have a sort of conversation with people when we were not speaking the same language. And so I was in a situation where I think people had it in their minds, they saw me a certain way and I didn't see myself that way, or they saw me some kind of way. I didn't even know how they were seeing me. And so I felt, I just felt like I was misunderstood. Now, I'm saying all of this not for a pity party and not to say, oh, woe is me and, all of that craziness. But what I can say is that I gained a lot from those experiences, a lot of professional experience, a lot of work experience, a lot of experience in terms of working with people from different backgrounds. And I grew as a person, absolutely.
Right.
So now how I'm starting to see success is you have to do something that speaks to your spirit. You've got to do something that I wouldn't necessarily say do what you got to do until you do what you want to do, or this sense of do your passion, or if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I don't believe in that. That's bogus, because with everything that you do, and I don't know about you, Valerie, but even with the stuff that I'm doing now, there's still a lot of grunt work and things that I think in a lot of ways is kind of slowed me down a bit, because that's still a part of the everyday kind of management part of doing things. But I do truly believe that success should be individually defined in terms of where you've come from, how far you've gone, and from that point, kind of thinking ahead or planning in terms of where you would like to go. And that's different for everyone.
So I think a nice way of kind of piggybacking on that is growth. You were talking about how your experiences have helped you grow professionally and personally. I personally feel that it's the personal that should become first. And when we become integrated people, so I'm going to back up a little bit. So yes, my family had access to education and highly prized education, but there was no one to help me do things. Like I kind of stumbled into some of the situations I was in, but it was a pathway of, like you said, stability, respectability. It was a way to go from just surviving to thriving.
Right.
And I definitely believe that we're all supposed to thrive, but once you get past the surviving stage, which I believe we're both past that stage of getting to the plateau. We're not at the mountaintop, but we're definitely at the plateau where we're like, okay, we can rest, we can gather ourselves, we can figure out what the next steps are. You need to be able to get there to figure out what is your pinnacle. What is that top that you're trying to reach? And for me, that is also very personal. And I agree also that doesn't mean that you're going to like everything you do. Like, I enjoy putting together podcasts. I hate editing them. I hate them. I hate that part. But I enjoy the ideas, the conversations. I get very energized by that process. It doesn't mean I like every part of it, but it's enough for me to keep going at it. Like, this is my second year. So that's important to consider, that it's not one thing or the other. I think so much of the media, or so much of what we see is black or white. We don't see the nuances and the multiple dimensions of what it takes to get to that place, or create that product, or do that thing. And we feel sometimes duped when when we hit something that's really tedious, and we're like, God, why did I just do it this way? But that's okay. Again, you're refining how you're defining it. You're refining your skill set. You're also refining and honing what your real purpose is, because unless you start to try things, which people who are in survival mode don't have the energy
Right.
to try things. Once you start to try things, then you start to really craft that one thing that you really feel like you need to do or have to, or you want to do with where you're going.
And I think that's the most important thing that you said that I really like is, I think for a lot of people, we're just trying to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And in this life, for a lot of people, that's all they can do.
Mm-hmm.
Or that's what they do their whole lives. And I don't know about you, but now that you say that, sometimes I feel like I've slowed my own progress down because of survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
This sense that I've gotten to this point where I have the privilege to, hey, look, I'm in Mexico right now.
Right.
I should be at work, but I'm not. But I have that privilege, you know, and I have other privileges and abilities to do things that a lot of people that I know who are very close to me that they cannot do. But that's something that we both worked really hard at, you know, because our sons are grown. They're in their 20s. They're living their own lives. They're doing their own things. And we're both still relatively young. And so I would definitely say for me right now is the biggest challenge has been moving from not only moving from the survivor to thriver mindset, but also having that reflect itself in my life. Because I've been working on the things that I've been working on for the past 4 years. And part of the challenge, part of the big challenge that I faced is just what I was saying to myself and what I have been saying to myself, which has slowed me down, I think, in a lot of ways. But I'm okay with that because, as you know, you said at the beginning and we've said, there's no straight path to this. And from what I've seen of other individuals who have gone on to be successful is a lot of trial and error. A lot of it is making multiple mistakes. And so that has been, and so what I take away from that is you got to keep going.
Right. And I think in terms of getting to this place, we think if we make mistakes, that's the end.
Yes.
And you know, there's no margin of error, but the fact
because there was no margin of error getting to this point.
But now there is a lot of play. I like that word, play. There is a lot of play and there is a lot of exploration that you have to be able to do in order to really become who and what you want to become. I think I've been reading a book that talks about how we're taught to see the world in lenses. So for folks who like theory, the postmodernism, you're looking at different lenses based on your privilege, based on your class, based on your gender, based on your race, all of those things. But we're not really taught in that. And okay, the lenses come from a having oriented way of looking at things. You're trying to gather, you're trying to own. You're trying to own a piece of not actual real estate, but you're trying to own something. And instead of trying to own something, you really want to start to become something, which means you have to do mirror work. You have to look at yourself and understand how you operate and what your capitulations are, and be able to do that inner reflection in a way, like you said, to be aware of the voices that you say to yourself, the things that you say to yourself, how limiting they can be, how they come out of place from your childhood or your previous days experiences, and really unpack that and unwork that and unlearn that.
Right, because it's almost like that popular saying, they say that when you become adult, you live the rest of your life trying to overcome your childhood. Yeah, I like this idea of, instead of owning, which is
lot of
loaded.
yes,
It
it is.
has a lot of connotations,
Yep.
versus becoming something. Because I feel like with owning something comes domination, control.
Right. But I think like right now in our culture, we're a very having oriented culture.
Right.
And so there is all of that, like dominance, control, competition, this scarcity mindset
Exactly.
that really distracts you from what you're supposed to be doing in here.
Exactly. And it's like once I let go of that owning and grasp more into that becoming, it's like my life has become so much more better and enlightening. And so just a quick thing, I have an organization called Beloved Lotus.
Mhm.
And essentially what I do is create online, and I could do it in person, spaces for Black women to essentially come to voice, connect, be together, just be themselves. And one of the challenges in terms of this owning mindset was, okay, I've got to get my website, I've got to get my LLC, I've got to do this, do that. And then I got all that, and then I was like,
now what?
Now what? And so I start doing the circles, and only one person showing up, two people showing up. And I was like, oh, I'm gonna start charging and this, that, and the other. And it just was like totally not, I kind of lost that fire and that energy for it. And so what I found is that since I would say September, October, I just said, how about I just start with just doing the circles once a week, as I did, and just take it from there. You can commit to just doing the circles once a week. And since I've done that, in terms of just committing to doing the circles once a week, that has been such a relief and a release for me, because there's no pathway for this.
Right.
And we've got to go at our own pace, and you keep moving, keep going. And so now I feel like coming up soon, I'll be ready to actually share online some of the stuff that I've written, or write, or you have a running blog of some of the writings that I've done in the different circles.
Or some of the people that have done writings in that circle.
Right, or some of the people who have done writing in that circle, just to give people a chance, a little bit of insight into actually what goes on, in order to draw attention.
Right. And I mean, I think I have had that similar thing. Like my last episode was about not having an episode for a month and a half, because I've got the website, I've got all these, I had my first client, and I was working with my first client, and all of these things, and things didn't work out exactly the way I had hoped and the way I had planned. And I came to a realization that all of that doing was preventing me from being, and I kind of hit a wall and just didn't do a podcast for a while. And it wasn't because I hadn't prepared one or hadn't thought about it. Like, there wasn't any of that. It was just that I needed to sit down and be still, and being able to give myself the permission to, it doesn't have to be just because I've set out that that I'm doing a podcast every other Monday, and Monday comes around like today and I haven't done it, doesn't mean that I'm a failure, or I've made a mistake, or people are like, oh my gosh, she's so unorganized. That's not what that means. It just means that life happened, something happened, and I will get to that episode when I get to that episode. And I am still establishing a body of work, or a body of work that I can look back to in the future and say, I did that.
Right. Yeah. It's funny you say that, because one of the women from my circle, she prints out the agendas. So every week I put together some poetry and some quotes and some questions, and that's what we use as fodder for discussion. And when she pulled them out and showed it to me, it really hit me that I've actually got a body of work.
Right.
This is amazing. I have been doing something.
Right. Well, and I struggle with that, because like all of this last year, I've had doctors, I've had other people say like, you're doing really great. And I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And it's like, you just have to really understand that it's not like going to school where you go to class, you take your notes, you take an exam and you get a letter grade.
Right.
This is a much more intuitive and personal process that you are folding into your layers of understanding, your layers of being. And there isn't necessarily this shiny gold star that you're going to get that someone's going to go, "Bing, you got." And instead it's like a unilome. It's circular. It's non-linear. It's knotted. It's beautiful in a way that we're not taught to see beauty in our own lives. I wanted to interject one thing. I think the magical thing about this time in human life is we have more people who are able to reach past their survival mentality
Yeah.
to looking at thriving. And I'm really happy to see so many voices come out, so many projects come out that 15 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago wouldn't have been possible. And I believe we're going in the right direction, even if it doesn't necessarily feel like it's fast enough.
Mm.
You know.
Well, I'm grateful that we're in this moment together. Because we both come a really way. And I never imagined myself here at this place. I imagine that my life would be something totally different, but I can say for sure that where I'm at right now, I'm very much happy with it. I'm at peace with where I'm at in my life.
I'm incredibly grateful
Yes.
for the opportunity to pause on all of the having, the creating and all of that stuff. I mean, I went from my mama's house to the military, from the military to having a husband, having children, to going back to school, and then all of the things that came after that. So I was always trying to do something, fit something, learn something, grasp something. And now I have time to figure out like, oh, I like to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's the best time for me, and do my exercise first thing in the morning. Like, I get to dictate for myself what my day looks like, what my week looks like, and to have the freedom, the privilege to be able to do that. I am immensely grateful.
Yeah, I would definitely say that I am too, and it's very humbling.
Mhm.
And humbling, not in a I guess a false kind of narcissistic kind of way, but in a really empathic, deep understanding type of way.
Because
Where
we're standing on other people's shoulders.
right, we are. And we were talking about this the other day where we think about the women who came before us. When I think about my mom and how she got me to this point, and then I think about her mother, and then her mother's mother who passed during childbirth, and then my grandmother, my father's mother, who she passed really early because of cancer, in her 50s. So just thinking about all the women of earlier generations and thinking about where I'm at in my life, to see how, not saying that just to see the things that I've been able to do is so differently from my mom and from my sister and from other women. Not necessarily better or worse or anything like that, but just being able to become.
Yeah, I mean,
because you really see the difference and you feel it and you can pick up on it when you see people who have the ability or have the privilege of becoming.
Right. It goes back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs of self-actualization. You can only get there if you have all of those other parts fulfilled. And people treat the hierarchy like it's a step stairs, like you can only go up or down, but really you're going up and down all the time, depending on where you are in that moment. But you can only ascend once you've gathered all of those other parts and you have those in abundance for yourself, that you can get to that moment where you're like,
yeah,
and I am, again, grateful for the space and the time, but also the journey, even though there have been a lot of rough parts. And they say God doesn't give you what you can't handle. I beg to differ sometimes.
Right, you
beg to differ sometimes.
like, really?
Right. But when you do survive that and you get on the other side, there is so much learning and growth and new understanding, that I really feel like I'm never gonna go back to the person I used to be, even 10 years ago. And that's important because, like you said, not all of us get that opportunity. And you can tell the difference. You can tell the difference in the way someone walks, how they interact with you, how they reflect their view of the world to you. And I'm lucky.
Yeah. I know one of the things that I picked up about myself between now and, let's say, 5-6 years ago, is I didn't realize how angry I was, how much anger I carried around in me. And it doesn't necessarily come out as, "Ooh,"
Right.
like that. It was like smoldering in me. And it was a lot of anger I think I carried towards myself, and a lot of anger that I just held towards the world. And it was anger that I had to check myself on and really work through letting go.
I love that you said that, because I also had an immense well of anger. And years of therapy weren't getting to it. My anger reveals itself through anxiety, and depression, mostly anxiety. And once I got the anxiety, I literally just had to admit to myself that I was going to have to chemically alter some of my brain chemistry in order to get past that well of anger. And I mean, I've never had to go back. And even if I have to take meds for the rest of my life, I'm good with that, because the person who carried around all that anger isn't the person I want to be. She was inflexible. She was judgmental. She was unkind. And I don't want to be that person, and she wasn't unkind like, I'm just going to be mean to you, but she was unkind with, okay, well, you can do it that way, but I really know the way to do this. That kind of unkind. And you can't ascend if you're doing it on the backs of other people. It's just, that's, I think, like a universal law out there. I mean, I think we see a lot of what we perceive as ascension, people getting what they want on the backs of other people, but they're really there's more to the story than what's shared, what's on the outside. And I think if you really want to become, you have to wrestle that down and come to terms with it.
Yeah, I think my anger showed up as entitlement. It showed up as a chip on my shoulder because I felt like I'd done all of this and I'm this So why can't I have this? I should be able to get this, that, and the other. And I felt like what I'd done to get there, that should have been enough. And so I was very angry because I felt like there was stuff owed to me, that I deserved certain things. And I think I realized that, no, you don't. I think I realized that, I don't know, I feel like in some ways I'm still working that out, but the most important thing I learned is who cares? And also, it's like the only thing you guaranteed in this life is that you're gonna die. That's it. And so everything else that happens to you, good, bad, or whatever, you know, it just is what it is. So yeah, I feel like I'm still working on that part.
But aren't we all?
Yeah, we all are. We all are. But that was very humbling for me to be like, oh, I didn't realize that. That was very interesting to have that moment with ourselves.
Yeah. There are so many moments. I still don't think there's enough time in the day.
Nope.
There's not enough energy that any one person could have it, at their disposal. That's enough. But like we said earlier, taking small steps, committing to yourself and not being afraid to push the pause button if you need to, or take a different route than the one you thought you were going to be on. And
that's really important. Take a different route. Don't be afraid to go in a different direction.
Right.
Because sometimes that different direction can be exactly what you need.
Right.
And you have to sometimes just step out on a whim, step out on faith, step out on whatever that is inside of you that's saying, no, go this way.
Right. Yeah. And I think like just listening, I think as Americans, I think this is an American thing. As Americans, we're taught not to listen to that voice inside of our heads or inside of our bellies or inside of your heart, wherever the voice comes from, but to really hone your tuning ear to that voice and trust it. I have been lucky that I feel like I've always had that voice. There have been a few times when I felt like just kind of wandering through the woods, but I've, for the most part, been able to listen to that voice. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not going to be hard.
Right.
Or you're not going to be disappointed, or you're not going to fail. But that voice will still be there for you if you continue to listen to it.
And what's important about listening to that voice is you got to get quiet.
Yeah.
So that means you're going to have to cut out a lot of the chitter chatter around you, whether it's sound, music, narratives, ideas, other people,
the media.
You really have to, and it's scary. It's very scary. At first.
Yeah, because when you're surviving, you're always in motion.
Yeah.
So to slow down and to pause, to stop, feels like, you're just gonna collapse.
You're open.
Right?
You're gonna collapse. You're a target now because you slow down. Or, oh, I should be doing something. Why am I not doing something? I'm not doing anything. Then it must be wrong if I'm not doing it.
Right. I agree with that. Wow. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up? Go with your friends.
Well,
that's what I wanted to say. Go with your friends.
And I will temper that by saying that friends is a tricky word because not everyone is your friend. And everyone should not be your friend because this journey is not for everyone, at least at one time. There may be people in your life who may gone ahead in this journey or people who may come after you, but you have to be willing to, if it's necessary, to let people go. That doesn't mean that they can't come back. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, but you cannot let your friends stop you on your journey.
I love that you say that because for me, a long time ago, I had to decide that friends are the people who support you. They might not understand and they might not even agree, but they love you anyway, and they will support you in the ways that they can. And the people who will criticize you, ridicule you, question like your sanity, those are people who it's not that they're not friends, but they're not the people who you can lean on when you are having a rough day and you're not certain about your direction. And those people are the people who come and go versus the people who stay for the duration. And even the folks who stay for duration, they have seasons as well. And I'm in the process of redefining friendships and some long-term friendships and what those really mean to me and what they add to my life. I think I firmly believe that you meet people for a reason, whatever that reason is, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they are always with you. They might just have a season, or they might just play a small role, and then you grow on and you move forward.
And you just appreciate or take what you can from that relationship and experience with them.
Right. And you love. I think that's really, really and to love doesn't mean to make yourself small or to give things away. It really means to hear your own voice, to hear their voice too.
And give space for them to be who they are.
Right. I think that's what this week has been all about, is really in this travel that we're doing around Mexico with another person, is really finding that you sometimes bump up against each other and you kind of go like, ow, that hurt. But being able to say, ow, that hurt. And to listen to, what that experience was like for the other person, and to make sense of it and come to peace with it. And a safe that you're all still safe and okay. And that's a true gift.
It is, because it's not easy dealing with conflict or dealing with that bump. And I know for a lot of people, and I'm glad we talked about this last night, that a lot of us did not learn how to deal with conflict in a positive way. And it shows, depending on who you're talking to or interacting with. And so a lot of times we've had to learn it. I know I had to learn it.
Definitely did.
And over the years, I've gotten better at dealing with conflict up front, instead of just running and hiding or doing something else or trying to avoid it. But yeah. Conflict. All right.
Anything else?
Laugh.
Often.
You gotta laugh.
And don't be afraid to let your hair down, because that's a thing too. That's a thing that I struggle with, but it's a thing too.
Yeah. Well, I let it up because I cut mine, but
right. Yeah. So thank you very much for listening or watching this episode. This has been another episode of Uncommon Voices, Uncommon Visions. I'm your host, Dr. Valerie Nyberg.
And I'm Dr. Nicole Gainyard.
Please feel free to like, share, or comment. And thank you so much for your time. We'll talk to you next time.
All right. Take care.
Bye.